Well, I should wish people a happy Valentine's Day. We're recording this on the 14th of February, 2008. Calvin, do you remember a Valentine's Day in Peru when you and I took a half an hour to get back, and I've got my head out the door waiting, trying to find the rumble strip, never mind the exit?
Yeah, that we were at the Maynard household, and it was a interesting little trip. And I just put a show on that we're going to be showing this week in the Plattsburgh area, and we apparently did it the year after, because we were talking about a year ago we were there, and a year ago today was a big blizzard here again. And
Absolutely.
On Valentine's Day of 2007. This, of course, is 2008.
And we'll be setting perhaps some snow records this year, too. Even though it's not snowing today, we've had our share.
It's just continuous, and they're running out of salt in Vermont.
Well, they're running out of salt here, too, although, unfortunately, the local television station rarely would ask the local Department of Transportation people or the highway people how they were doing. I noticed there is plenty of sand on your rural roads. We're up here at Champlain in Calvin's living room, a familiar venue for this program, and they got the sand down.
Well, it's a good thawing day today. We had, as we're taping this, we had some precipitation yesterday in a frozen form, and today the sun is out, so if they can get that sand down, it clears the roads up.
And let's hope people got some of the snow off their roofs. And, you know, now is the time we start watching things, because can spring be far behind? You watch the snow here, and I watch the river level, and so on, and so on, and so on. We've done a lot of historical programs here. We have a great affection for the Clinton County Historical Association. Our good friend Ken Ray has sat at tables with us and looked at old pictures, and we wanted to get him today.
We were hoping to be at the Clinton County Historical Association Museum, but Ken's schedule and our schedule just wouldn't coincide, and it's tough to pin Gordy down because he's going on another vacation.
Another vacation, this time to Mexico. These books by the late Dr. Alan Everest are favorites of mine, and I know yours too. He wrote many books. He was a huge fan of Dr. Kellogg, whom we've talked about many times, and the history of this area. And our good friend Keith Herkelo, the Plattsburgh city clerk, spent many years trying to confirm some of the observations and conclusions of Dr. Everest when he wrote about history, without really being able to define some of the things that happened specifically as historians are able to do today. So this guy was himself a great pioneer, wasn't he, Dr. Everest?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this story here. This is Pioneer Homes of Clinton County. There have been two editions of it. The first was a hardcover, which I can't afford, but Gordy has.
Look, guess what the dog did to this book a long time ago, and I hope that wasn't a commentary.
we won't get into that.
Many years ago, but this is kind of cute, because inside the fly, and the cover of the book, E.M. Duran, February 1967, room 302, Plattsburgh Junior High School, 17 Broad Street. So I don't know if there was any skullduggery here and somebody who lifted this book.
I better check here and see if there's a little card in the back. You're overdue.
Are we overdue?
2 cents a day since 1970.
Oh, that's incredible.
That was printed in 1966.
Correct.
The softcover edition I have was reprinted in 1971. And they are published, and the copyright is held by the Clinton County Historical Association, so that's why we wanted to get our buddy Ken Ray involved. And I did call Roger Harwood, and they had a board meeting last night, and they gave us full permission to go ahead and to show all the pictures in here, and I think this book just showed to me the tremendous effort that Dr. Kellogg went through to preserve the history. He went up and down, north and south, or I think he started in the south and worked his way north, although I'm not sure where the numbers all start here. But he did just a tremendous job. Went around, took all these photos, talked to the historians, found out, first of all, these places even exist. I mean, how do you start getting that kind of information.
And he had to collect photographs, and he had to get history. And we learned so much about the history of my wife's family and Benjamin Vaughan, one of the original Revolutionary War heroes who settled in this area, whom we've talked about on this program. I was thinking before we came up here today to meet with Calvin in his home on the Ridge Road in Champlain, the home of hometown cable, if you will. The last time I ever met Dr. Everest, did you ever meet him?
Yes, when they dedicated the John Ross Historical Room at the Rouse's Point Library, Bob, Ben, and I were able to sit down with him for about half an hour, and we got some input. And I think he talked about, I know I've heard it somewhere where he talked about the printing of this book here and how he did all the photos and had to get the right time of the day because you want to get the sun shining on when you're looking at a house on the east side or the west side.
Absolutely.
You want to get the sun in the right position, so you didn't want to get there if it's a house facing west. You didn't want to get there late in the day. You wanted to get there early in the day, and then the house is facing, so it's just a tremendous amount of thought and effort went into
You're
this.
fortunate you got a half an hour to talk to him because he was a difficult guy to pin down. I interviewed him a few times on the radio, and the last time I got a chance to meet him is an occasion when I wish you had been there, but I'm not sure exactly whether you had started this hometown cable by then or not. It was at a meeting of the Clinton County Historical Association, and a group of the radio personalities, the old timers, if you will, were invited to attend, among them Chet Bosworth and Bird Burdan, who was a star of stage and screen.
And Parker commercials.
And Parker commercials, and myself. Bird brought a whole bunch of old pictures that he had taken in radio and television, and Chet was there, and we all made our little presentations. Dr. Alan Everest was there at the time, and it was a wonderful occasion. And although we got those old-time personalities together for a TV show, and I'm glad we did.
Along with Art Pierce.
Along with Art Pierce, and that one would have been a great one to save had we been there at the association. But Dr. Alan Everest was a complicated, interesting, brilliant man, and no one can deny his passion for the history of this area going right back to the beginning. I reread his introduction this morning, knowing that I was going to come here, and the preface to this book, and isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? Tracing the history of the area, the first settlers that came here, what they did, when it happened, and right up to the present time, and every single one of the homes, as you mentioned, is numbered. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons you were attracted to this book in the first place is because the cover photo, which I don't have, but you do, is Dewey Tavern.
Dewey Tavern, and he refers to it, maybe not in this publication, but in one of his publications, I think the 1988 that was put out for the county bicentennial. It refers to it as the one of the most historic buildings still standing in Clinton County, the Dewey Tavern.
And you and I have agreed with that, and all too often it's neglected when it comes to Battle of Plattsburgh or Battle of Lake Champlain or Battle of the Bay of Plattsburgh discussions, because a lot happened here.
Yes, and I've, as you know, recently been gathering some more historical information, and I've just picked up a book from the 1914 era that said the subject was what historians say about the Battle of Plattsburgh, and it gives very little input as to what happened before that. It didn't talk about Dewey Tavern, didn't talk about the stuff that went on at the Hubble home, and talked a little bit about Culver Hill, but and I think now we're demanding that we talk about the whole thing that started August 28th and the stuff that went before and after the battle.
I think CNN started it when they decided to spin all these things. There is a tremendous interest and upswing and interest in history. We're recording this right in the middle of I have to say it is the most interesting presidential campaign I've ever witnessed in my life. Never have I seen anything like it. Ingredients, the writer's strike, so that many of people's favorites television episodes were not run. So where did they all go to? The networks. And boy, did they spin and spin and spin, and they're still spinning. And in spite of all that, the campaign is very, very interesting. So we're in an age where people want to know. This whole communications thing is a favorite topic of mine, having been in the business for so many years. We get our information in spoonfuls and bowls full now anytime we want to tune in. And all the media have joined that. And so it's just terrific. And thanks to guys like Keith Herculow, who re-examined all of Dr. Alan Everest stuff concerning the battles of Plattsburgh, as he called it, and confirmed a lot of the conclusions that Dr. Everest came to. We're learning more and more. And isn't it great? You know, as young people, when I first came up here, we knew the general story. But I had never heard of Culver Hill.
No.
I'd never heard of Dewey Tavern until you took me there.
Yeah, I think there has been a rebirth. I think 100 years ago, people did have a lot of interest in their local history, and somehow with the Great Wars, our attention went otherwise. And then with the mobilization of the workforce, where we can travel and go places and do things, people started to worry about other things other than their history, and I think it's coming back, and I'm glad.
Thanks to the Clinton County Historical Association, thanks to the Battle of Plattsburgh Committee and the Battle of Plattsburgh Association, there is a greater focus on that time period and our history, and it's enticing young people to learn. You notice every time we go to a parade, every time we record for posterity on television one of the functions downtown, a lot of little kids are there. Mm-hmm. And many of their parents are dressed in costume, and so are they. And reenacting is really, really blossoming here in the North Country, and it's one of those feel-good things for me, and I know it is for you too, because we have such a rich history.
Yeah, I think the reenacting part of it is good because it does get the kids involved. I think they accept it more when they can put themselves and walk a mile in those shoes.
Gives it perspective, doesn't it? Historical perspective. Yeah. Great.
Well, we've got 178 pictures for you to read captions on here, Gordy. So we're going to have to get going. I did want to read that last paragraph here that Dr. Everest said in his preface to this book. He says, "There are undoubtedly many other homes of the pioneers which I have missed. However, I followed up on every clue from whatever source, including more than 200 people I've interviewed. 200 people he interviewed. Without exception, they are interesting and helpful. I wish to acknowledge with particular gratitude the continuous assistance I have had for months from Miss Emily McMasters of Plattsburgh, Mrs. B.F. Sullivan of Shazy, Mrs. Eleanor Spaulding of Ausable, Mrs. Marjorie Porter of Keysville, Mr. Andrew Broadwell of Rouse's Point, Mr. Fuller Allen of Plattsburgh, who helped greatly in tracing and verifying ownerships of property, and Mr. William Crosby of Plattsburgh, who has restored one of the fine old houses himself and who was a great assistance in the photographic work on this book."
Alan Everest was a historian and many other things. So historians want to get it right. And so he labored over these little tiny books for many, many months, and that proves it. Just exactly what you've read.
All right, so next voice you're going to hear is Gordy Little.
You're going to show the pictures while I read the caption, aren't you? Glad we have both of them?
Yep.
You're going to put them on later, huh?
Yep.
This is the Bailey DeLord home at 17 Cumberland Avenue, Plattsburgh. We know it as the Kent DeLord House, perhaps misnamed, and you'll find all about that later, but it was the headquarters back. It was built in 1797. Colonel John Bailey bought the house from William and later deeded it to his daughter, the wife of James Kent, who never lived in it but sold it to Henry DeLord in 1810. DeLord added the conservancy on the left for the raising of grapes, and we've been in there so many times where the store's located. British officers made their headquarters there. 1814, left a tea chest behind when they retreated. You can see it there anytime you want to. In 1817, President Madison took tea with Judge DeLord. I love that house.
You've got Madison, I've got Monroe.
Come on. You got to be kidding! Is that cool?
That is cool. So I'm assuming that the reprint is
That's
correct.
like the Today Show today. They were giving one date because it showed that on the teleprompter, and their script gave another date. They said, "Well, it was 1800s anyway. We know it was a long time ago."
Look it up at home. Here's your assignment. Look up and see who the president was in 1817.
I love it.
It's either Madison or Monroe. I'm betting on Monroe.
I'm betting on Monroe. This is an earlier edition than yours. Okay, number 2 is the Davidson home at 9 Cumberland Avenue, Plattsburgh. The original owner, Charles Platt. First known resident was Benjamin Graves, Revolutionary War veteran, for 3 years a body servant of George Washington. Original house, 1-story frame structure. Subsequent owners raised, extended, and bricked it in. Graves finally sold it in 1808 to an absentee landlord whose most famous tenant was Dr. Oliver Davidson. His 2 famous poetess daughters, Lucretia and Margaret, lived here. Other owners include Charles Blake, Ebenezer Winslow, Judge John Booth. And you have to realize this book is 42 years old.
Yeah,
so there have been changes since then.
Even though it's 42 years old, I would like us to include what they call present owner, which was in 1966.
Mrs. Dorothy Parkhurst.
Yeah, because in one of these books in Champlain, or I think it's going to be under Champlain, not Rouse's Point, but maybe under Rouse's Point. But in today's paper, the owner is in there in the obituary column.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
Isn't that interesting? So many things have changed since the 60s. Some of these houses don't exist anymore, tragically. Some have changed the face so much it would be hard to recognize them. Moving on to the Saley home, 3 Cumberland Avenue, Plattsburgh, in the news recently because it was left by a good friend who died to the Clinton County Historical Association. It was the home of the museum for some time, until they moved to the Four Chimneys building at Plattsburgh Air Force Base, and now it's been sold again to a private concern. And that'll add a little money to the coffers of the Historical Association.
badly needed.
And badly needed. Original owner was Peter Saley, 1795 it says. He lived until 1826. And Sally Warren was the owner in the 1960s, a good friend of ours who started the League for the Control and Protection of Animals and donated this home to the association. The original Saley home, built in the style of a Swiss chalet. Saley himself came from Lorraine, France, had already lived 10 years on Cumberland Head, served as congressman and collector of customs. His son Frederick lived here. His granddaughter married Albert Warren in 1878, thus that connection. The Warrens rebuilt the house, kept some of the rooms of the original building intact. Present owner, descendant of Peter Saley, it said here, and he had beautiful gardens across the street along the Saranac River, and we've seen the old photographs from the 1870s, which are quite beautiful. Okay,
Next.
shall we go on? We should have the little clicker here for the slides. Number 4, the Boynton House. The Boynton Farm, actually, at 98 Boynton Avenue in Plattsburgh. Original owner, Charles C. Platt. Circa 1802 for this house. Present owner, it said, Henry Fortin, and we knew him from the oil business here, A. Fortin Sons. Charles built in emulation of his brother Isaac on the adjoining farm, but he lost it in a sheriff's sale. Samuel Lowell bought it from the absentee owners in 1813. British Major General Brisbane made his headquarters here in 1814. And Lowell supposed to have concealed a keg of British gold on the premises. Let's go looking for it. The house reverted to absentee owners from whom John Boynton bought it in 1820, and the Boyntons owned it until 1887. And at number 5, the Lowell House, 22 Macomb Street in Plattsburgh. This house is reputedly so haunted. Just thought you might like to know. I love this house. You can see it today, and it looks precisely the same as it did in this old photograph. The original owner, Samuel Lowell, date 1815. The present owner in this book was Mrs. Margaret McDowell. Lowell supposedly built the house with British gold. He secreted it in house number 4, and that's why they came back to look for the gold. Anyway, he constructed a 2-story English manor house with a tower and a conservatory on the left. Shepherd Bowen, after 1865, added the 3rd story and the mansard roof that you can see. William Morris Hunt painted the murals, which may be seen on the inside. What a beautiful home. Number 6, the Moores House. That's at 106 Bridge Street in Plattsburgh. Also, tremendous history.
And we should point out that this is pre-enhanced 911, so these addresses may have changed. So 106 Bridge Street might be an entirely different location
it is,
right now.
I can promise you that it is. But just so you know, people look at the house as Calvin shows it on the screen. The original owner was Joseph Green. The house was built 1803. The owner listed here was Howard Crowder. During the Battle of Plattsburgh, this was General McComb's headquarters. This also had, ask me anytime, folks, for the ghost stories connected with these beautiful historic homes. Boy, is there a good one here. British cannonball came through the open door, lodged in the south wall. You can see the cannonball right in there today as you walk in on the right-hand side. Green lost his house to General Benjamin Moores, who bought it in 1814. I mispronounced Macomb's headquarters, as we're told. It's called pronounced Macomb. Anyway, it was a frame house facing Bridge Street. Before he moved in 1821, Moores added this Peru Street wing and bricked it over. And he lived there until his death in 1838. A DAR marker commemorates its history. Number 7. Would you pronounce that Freilig?
Fraley, I guess.
Okay, 7 Peru Street, Plattsburgh. The original owner, probably Edward Stickles, dates to about 1800. The owner listed in this book was Leo Baker. Subsequent owners of the house following Stickles were David Bright, Elijah Herrick, and in 1820, John Freilich. The next home, another one familiar one to me, number 8, the Broadwell home at 9 Peru Street, Plattsburgh. Noah Broadwell was the original owner. The date is 1797. The present owner listed was Norm Dame, a prominent person in our community. Noah lived there till 1801, maybe in the back of the 3 sections. The middle section had been built by the time of the War of 1812. For the present owner, has found shot in some of the timbers. Is that neat? George Webster, after 1848, probably added the large front section. Between Broadwell and Webster, Nathaniel Z. Platt and Anson Sperry owned the home. The Peabody home, 17 Peru Street. See the sign that says tourists in the picture? Original owner, Adriel Peabody. Dates to 1805. The owner listed here was Walter J. Dame. Peabody was the first resident lawyer when he arrived in town. That's 1795. Occupied this home at the time of his death in 1810. His widow sold it in 1822, and later owners included Pearlie Moore, C.W. Merritt, and Albert D. Boomhauer.
And this was not the Peabody home. Has nothing to do with Peabody's.
Just in case people remember that too. I love it. All right, number 10, the Dr. Benjamin Moore's home, 135 Margaret Street, Plattsburgh. The original owner was Moss Kent, built in 1815. Clinton County had it as an office building. Didn't we go there for the 90th birthday party of Addie Shields? When wasn't the DA Daughters of the American Revolution in there?
On Margaret Street?
This is 135 Margaret Street. Yeah, no, it looks like that home, but it
looks like that building, but not.
I'm sorry, it's not.
The DAR building, no.
Okay, built in 1815. The owner at that time was a Clinton County office building. Kent gave this house to a niece who married Dr. Moores. The family lived here for many years, and the county had owned it at that time for about 50 years. The Averill Emerson home is number 11, 37 Cornelia Street. Moss Kent was the original owner. It dated to 1815. The owner in this book was Otis Brothers. The house once stood at the corner of Cornelia and Margaret Streets, facing Margaret. Kent gave the home to his niece Elizabeth, wife of Henry K. Averill, 1824. Levi Platt occupied it at the time of his death in 1849. Joseph Emerson bought it in 1854. His daughter, Mrs. E.C. Lowe, moved it in 1901 to make room for the Lowe block, which had since burned by the time this was done. Of course, this building is long gone. Okay, number 12, the Biss home.
Bliss.
B-L-I-S-S is Bliss,
Yeah.
right. 46 Cornelia Street, James Trowbridge, the original owner, dated back to 1815. And the owner when this book was written was Dr. Leonard Schiff, another great historical figure in Plattsburgh. Trowbridge sold the house in 1823. 1832, Chester Bliss bought it. The family held it till 1865. Dr. Leo F. Schiff obtained it in 1910. Number 13, the Birch Home, 50 Cornelia Street. James Bailey originally owned it in 1820, not the James Bailey that we know from Plattsburgh, Clinton County historian. The owner when this book was written was William J. Murray. In 1836, Bailey and Eliezer Miller exchanged homes on Cornelia Street. The Millers owned it till 1859. Then Dr. Isaac P. Foote, great-grandson of Charles Platt. Mrs. Mary Averill Birch, once the owner of the house in number 11, that's the Averill Emerson home that we talked about, acquired the house in 1891. That brings us to number 14, known as the Old Methodist Parsonage. 38 Court Street, Plattsburgh, where I began my radio career. See what it says on that sign out front? WEAV.
Yeah.
1961. That's where it all started for me. It says, present owner, Weave Radio, is the station headquarters. That's now a parking lot for Clinton County, by the way. The house was built with cut and fitted stone on the front, rough stone on the sides. Nathan Averill mortgaged it to his neighbor Reuben Walworth, who took it over in 1834. In 1844, the Methodist Church, which adjoined Nathan on the east and is still standing, it said, acquired the house as a parsonage. Of course, it's not standing anymore. Neither is this. It's all gone. Clinton County Government Center is there. The Walworth home is number 15 at 40 Court Street. The original owner was Reuben Walworth. It was built in 1813. The owner, when the book was written by, it was H.E. Atwater as a retail store. Walworth's first house on this site burned in 1812, and he rebuilt with stone. When he became state chancellor, he moved to Saratoga, sold his house to Trinity Church, which apparently used it briefly as a rectory before building next door. W.G. Brown bought the property in 1845. The addition in front is recent, it says. Remember, this book was written in 1966. Number 16 is the Dunham home at 48 Court Street. Original owner, Charles Dunham, dates to 1805. James A. Fitzpatrick, another prominent name in Plattsburgh history, owned it in the 60s. Pamela Dunham conducted a private school here before the War of 1812. The British used the basement as a hospital in 1814, left some of their wounded behind them. This was known as the Dunham House until 1852, when George W. Dodds bought it. Remained in the family till 1935. The section on the right and a rebuilt roof are 20th century additions, but the original also had a hipped roof. We spent a lot of time in there with our hometown cable cameras, as it was for some time the home of the Clinton County Museum, Historical Museum.
Fitzpatrick loaned it to the Historical Association, and that was their spot for a long time.
So we've seen a few moves from the down in City Hall, upstairs, and on the third
museum,
floor, to here, to there, and finally to the present home, a beautiful home.
Yeah, well, I think it's back to being a funeral home. I know before.
Oh, it is?
I think so, and it used to be Blixt used to have a funeral home there, and then
Rudy Blixt, right?
Yeah, and then I think it's a funeral home again now, I believe.
Okay.
It could be wrong, but
I got to go to a wake on that street this afternoon. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Next is 17, the Charles Platt home, another famous home, 24 to 26 Broad Street. Charles Platt. The back part dates to 1795, the front part after 1821. Les Wilson owned it in 1966. One of the proprietors of Plattsburgh, Charles, arrived in 1785. He occupied a prominent place in the political and economic life of the village. After his death in 1821, his son Nathaniel said to have moved the original home back on the lot, added the front section. Judge Hale and Dr. A.C. Carver were later owners. Number 18, Sperry's Tavern, 48 Broad Street. Gilead Sperry was the original owner when it was built in 1800. The present owner in the book here was Mrs. Lena Luria. A very large, rambling structure in whose ballroom many civil and religious affairs were held. Bishop Asbury preached here in 1811. Judge J. Douglas Woodward acquired the building in 1848 and divided it, moving part of it to the next lot west and refurbishing the rest for his own use. His daughter Helen held it till 1921. Number 19, Hunter's Tavern, 45 Broad Street. Original owner Edward Hunter, 1800. The owner in 66 was Dr. Robert Graves. Originally a rambling frame building which Hunter sold in 1831 to the first of a series of presiding elders of the Methodist Church. In 1867, George W. Day bought it, probably bricked over the front while tearing down some of the back part. Its window trim has a distinctly Victorian appearance. That's kind of neat. Number 20 is the Walworth home, the Walworth House, 33 Broad Street. Jonathan Griffin was the original owner in 1815. In 1966, it was Leah Mitchell and Mrs. Ralph Goyette. Griffin, town supervisor, state assemblyman, lost his first house on this site by fire during the Battle of Plattsburgh. 1828 deeded this second house to his daughter Delia, wife of Hiram Walworth Sr., remained in the Walworth family till 1907 when it was bought by Andrew Wilson. Number 21 is the Sheldon Hager Homestead on the Moffett Road. Original owner was Aruna Sheldon, or Aruna, date 1810. The present owner then was Benjamin Hager, famous family on Cumberland Head. In 1814, British soldiers kept mules in Sheldon's barn. 1881, Luther Hager married into the Sheldon family. The seventh generation from Aruna now lives in the house. That was 1966. Number 22, the Woodruff Moore Homestead on Route 9 north of Plattsburgh. Original owner was Silas Woodruff. The builder was Ozias Safford. That date was 1810, and it was owned in 1966 by Floyd Putnam. This remained in the Woodruff family until 1854, when Amos Moore Jr. bought it. The Moore family owned it till 1946. Safford built several brick homes which survive. Now, number 23, the John Adams Homestead, Cumberland Head. Another John Adams with two D's.
And an O.
And an O. Original owner was John Adams. The house was built in 1790. Roma Castine. How about that for a familiar name? Owned it in 1966. Revolutionary War veteran Adams was one of the original proprietors of Plattsburgh. For its day, this home was a mansion that included slave quarters. His son-in-law, Luther Hager, succeeded him, and for years it was a Hager farm. The tower was a later addition. Kind of a powerful-looking house, isn't it?
Yep.
Number 24, the Melanchthon L. Woolsey Homestead on Cumberland Head. Original owner, Melanchthon Woolsey. It dates from 1785 to 1800. The owner then was Dr. Bill Ledoux. Woolsey bought the farm in 1785, built the section on the right soon afterward, completed the left half by 1800. Luther Hager, who was known as Luth Hager, acquired it in 1845, presented it to his son Charles Luther. Later in the century, the right section was burned, and in 1894 considerably reconstructed, including the addition of dormers, which you see in the picture.
Now, you notice so many of these homes are owned by doctors. It seems like only the doctors could afford some of these homes.
But they're, and the ones that are preserved, it's a credit to the people who did buy these, who had their sense of history and the place of these great homes in history. Number 25, the Durand Homestead on Cumberland Head. The original owner, Marinus F. Durand. The date, it's pre-1800. The owners at that time were Albert and Charles Hager, whose names we've mentioned. Durand was on this property by 1790, but around the time of the War of 1812 he moved into Plattsburgh Village, and Jonathan Hager acquired the farm, and it was still in the family when this book was written. Number 26, the Barber House, Route 22. Original owner Amos Barber. The builder was Ozias Safford. We've heard his name before. That dated to about 1810, and Harry Shields owned it in 1966. Mantels, fireplaces, Dutch ovens still intact. Like Safford's other buildings, this one is a brick. He was a brother-in-law barber. A later owner was Dr. Ira Rolson, a dear friend. Okay, number 27, the Howe Morrison Farm, Route 22. John Howe, Sr., the builder was Marsh stonemason of Beekmantown. We don't know the first name. Built about 1805. James Chauvin owned it when this book was written. Howe bought it in 1801 from John Rolson. By tradition, some British troops ordered breakfast here on their way to Plattsburgh in 1814. You gotta love it. John and then Stephen Howe owned the farm till 1855 when Chauncey Morrison bought it. The porch is a 20th century addition. Number 28, the Isaac Allen Homestead on the Barber Road, originally owned by Isaac Allen, built in 1792. Charlie Rissett owned it at this time, and the Rissetts were in the realty business for a long time, as you know.
The
Agency. Allen's first house on this site burned in 1892. The family owned it till 1865 when Gilbert Duran bought it. His name was given to the road previously known as the Barber Road.
Okay, and I'll just correct you once in a while. It was 1792 that the house burnt.
Oh, 1792. I wish you would, yes. We need a little editing.
I've got the advantage of reading it while you're
along
reading
with
it.
us, yeah. Number 29, the Marsh Stafford Home Farm on Route 22. The original owner, George Marsh. Builder Marsh, stonemason of Beekmantown. We mentioned his name before. He built it in 1815. And Ron Wood owned it when this book was written. We know Ron so well.
Yeah.
The Marshes owned this farm until 1858. Cortlandt C. Stafford bought it, and his great-grandson was the present owner in 1966.
So we know who Ron Wood's great-grandfather is.
Oh, absolutely. Now, number 30, the McCready Fitzpatrick. On Route 22, the original owner, James McCready. The builder was Marsh again, the stonemason of Beekmantown. Busy guy.
That's right. I built one every year.
Probably did. This was 1815. Lemuel Fitzpatrick owned it when the book was written. Charles deeded the land for this house to his son in 1804. James's descendants owned it till 1876 when John Fitzpatrick bought it, and it was still in his family at that time. 31, the McCready Homestead, Route 22. Charles McCready, the original owner when it was built in 1795. Richard Dick Gibbard owned it when this book was written. McCready settled in Plattsburgh in 1785, built a section on the left first, added the stone wing about 1823. His original chimney was 12 feet square.
Wow.
Wow, big chimney.
Had big logs on that one.
Yeah. Number 32, the Isaac Platt home on Old Route 22. The original owner was Isaac Platt, built 1802, was owned in 66 by Redmond and Genevieve Bean, Holland. In 1814, the British bought their wounded from the skirmish at Halsey's Corners to this house. I did not know that. One died here, was temporarily buried in the garden. Major General Robinson made his headquarters here. In 1882, Michael Bean bought it, and it was in his family in 1966. I had forgotten that piece of history. Now we come to the Halsey Homestead in the Tom Miller Road. That's number 33. The original owner, Jonas Allen, built in 1790, was owned in 66 by Dr. Robert Seckler. Jonas settled on this property in 1786, but moved to Beekmantown in 1796. The next year, the Reverend Frederick Halsey, First Presbyterian pastor, bought the farm, conducted a school in a separate building on the property. The corners nearby are named for him. After Frederick, his son Cornelius owned the property. Later owners included the Reverend Moses Chase and Horace Davies, who added the dormers and side porch. Number 34, the Collins Homestead on the Comstock Road. The original owner was John Townsend Adams, dated to 1805. Betty Tartaglia was the owner in 1966. Townsend, son of John Adams of Cumberland Head, became a circuit rider for the Methodist Church. The first quarterly conference of the Plattsburgh Circuit was held in that house in 1809. Mrs. Adams conducted a boarding school for girls here. 1855, Townsend deeded the home to his daughter Julia, wife of Alonzo Collins. It remained in the Collins family for about 90 years.
And from the grass on the lawn, it looks
Doesn't look like it was occupied at that time.
Yeah, hopefully it was repaired, because that looks like a beautiful home.
Yep. Number 35, Stores Tavern. That's on the Military Turnpike. Lemuel Stores owned it when it was built in 1805. The owner in 66 was Harry Finnegan. This was probably a frame house, which was later bricked over, as many were. Lemuel moved to Jay in the 1830s, but the house remained in the Stores family till 1883, when it was acquired by Matthew Meader. Number 36, the Fordham Homestead, Robinson Road, West Plattsburgh. The original owner, James Fordham, built 1807. Mr. and Mrs. Ralph Colton owned it when this book was written. Apparently, Fordham died young, and his widow deeded it away temporarily in some kind of custody for minor children, who obtained full title in 1820. The present L was added in 1928. Fordham descendants have always lived there, Mrs. Colton's grandmother being a Fordham. Number 37. Oh, another haunted home. Many of Kay's relatives have lived here. I used to pay my rent there 100 million years ago. The Bradford home on the Bradford Road, West Plattsburgh. The original owner, Elijah Bradford. It dates back to 1810. It was owned by Mrs. Leila Provost. And Bradford was born in Maine, where he lost most of his family in an Indian raid. He was a Revolutionary War veteran who came to Plattsburgh in about 1800. The Bradfords go back to the Mayflower. How about that? And that's a wonderful home that still exists. The walls do talk there, I can promise you that. Number 38, the Newcomb Mead Homestead in West Plattsburgh. Original owner, Kenner Newcomb. Built 1800. It was owned by Alton Nelson in the 60s. Kenner was a Revolutionary War veteran and settler in 1785. His son was the first male infant born in town. Interesting.
Yeah.
After Newcomb, Cyrenus Mead bought the property, and the family held it for many years. Number 39, the Henry Ostrander home in West Plattsburgh. Familiar with Henry, that's for sure, and his history. It was built at about 1800 and owned by James St. Denis when this book was written. Ostrander came to the area 1785. His first home served as a shed when the present one was built. The entrance to the farm was originally from the Rand Hill Road. Number 40 is the Levi Scribner homestead in West Plattsburgh. Levi Scribner built it in 1807. The owner in 1966 was Fountain Brothers Post 1619.
And they are still the owners.
And they are still the owners, and the building does not look anything like that. My wife spent a lot of her childhood there had friends who lived in that house. Anyway, the family came there in 1807 to this 400-acre farm, which included mills on the river. They just recently redone the beautiful mill site there. The pond and corners nearby take the family name.
Yep.
It's a nice spot.
For all you slow pitch softball players, that's the site in West Plattsburgh.
Spent a lot of time playing softball right there.
Yeah.
Okay, now the number 41 is the Scribner Hunter home in West Plattsburgh. The original owner, Jeremiah Scribner, the date was 1820. The present owners were Mr. and Mrs. Walter Bracken. It's up on a knoll between the Bracken Road and the Vaughan Road, spelled incorrectly, and this was for many years the Vaughan Homestead. And my wife's ancestors owned this house for many years. It says this was part of Jeremiah's father's farm. Scribners held this property to 1862, the Bidwells till 1882 when John Hunter bought it. The house was extended to the left about 1840. Now it's got a beautiful garage in the back and an in-ground pool and who knows whatever. It's a beautiful place. I wanted to buy it desperately at one point. Number 42, the Newcomb Bates Homestead in West Plattsburgh. The original owner, Platt Newcomb, 1810. The owner when this book was written was Herbert Recor. As an infant of 2 years, Platt by virtue of his being the first male child born in Plattsburgh, was deeded 100 acres by the town's proprietors in consideration of love and goodwill. Platt built a finely proportioned home with a Palladian window. His son Levi sold the property in 1875 to Moses Bates. Great home. Okay, here's one that you're familiar with. Under number 43, the Baker Bromley home in West Plattsburgh. The original owner was John Baker. In 1796, the present owner, it said, when this book was written, was John Donahue. Baker built a one-story brick home. The Bakers owned it till 1899. Jerome Bromley bought it. He was probably the builder of the second story. The dividing line in the brick is easy to trace. You can see it there. And number 44, the Baker home in West Plattsburgh. John Baker was the original owner of this house. It dates to 1804. The owner when this book was written was Donald Bullis, Dud Bullis, whom we know very well, a dear friend from our Camp Kettle days,
Yeah.
right? The original house had one story. In it, Baker ran a hotel. Captain of militia in the War of 1812, he contracted consumption and died in 1816. His son George probably raised and enlarged the dwelling. That home still exists. Great home.
I'm confused here though, but if we're going back to the Newcomb Mead homestead, and number 38, it said Kinner Newcomb, his son was the first male infant born in town.
Uh-oh.
And then
Uh-oh.
on
Now we
number
got Platt.
42, the
Yeah.
Newcomb Bates house, Platt, by virtue of being the first male child born in Plattsburgh, was deeded 100 acres by the town's proprietors. So within 2 pages back there, Dr. Everest contradicted himself.
I wonder if they were different, probably not different towns.
It's all listed under
All
Plattsburgh.
the same,
yeah.
listed on Plattsburgh.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, and this is probably not a fair criticism, Dr. Everest was a very busy guy. And it wasn't as easy to confirm facts when he wrote this book and many of his other books in the 1960s. And as I mentioned earlier in our program, Keith Herkelo, the city clerk, has researched Dr. Alan Everest's work word by word by word. And obviously he has found some mistakes in the work, but that's easy to do in retrospect when you have so many advantage of modern microfilm and so on, and documents are more available to the public. And yeah, I would imagine maybe they were conflicting historical records at the time.
And if Gordy or I ever should make a mistake,
Oh boy!
please feel free to tell us.
Yeah, or write it in your next history book. Oh, I don't even know where I am.
Number 45. We just left Dud Bullis.
Okay, we left good old Dud. Number 45, the Baker Bidwell home on Route 3. I love this home as well. Just has a style that fits my personality. The original owner was Jeremiah Baker, 1805. Violet Goodman owned it when the book was written. Baker lived there only until 1814. His original home was the wing on the right. Several changes of ownership occurred before Dr. L.F. Bidwell bought it in 1846. In recent times, Nicholas Rock added the large main section. 46. This is the Vaughn House on Route 3. The original owner was my wife Kay's ancestor, Benjamin Vaughn, 1805. The Mr. and Mrs. John Banker owned this in 1966. The house is still very much there, and you can tell by that octagon-shaped window in the front. It was part of Banker's Orchards for a long, long time. That all has changed hands now, but this great homestead is still there. I can tell you that Vaughn was a veteran of the Revolutionary War from Vermont when he moved here. He survived Arnold's Quebec campaign and then the smallpox. His original home was probably one story, perhaps frame. 1840, the building was enlarged. Gable window obtained a 48-inch piece of Redford glass with a bullseye, which is now in the DuPont Museum. Vaughn's descendants have always lived there. Mrs. Banker was a Vaughn, and you know my wife was a Vaughn, and it goes on and on and on. But he also lived Benjamin Vaughn also married one of the Averill girls and lived at the present site of McDonough Hall in Plattsburgh at one time and was buried there. Number 47 is the Balch home on Route 3. The original owner, Ebenezer Balch, in 1812. Michael Murnane owned it when this was written. Ebenezer lost heavily in the timber trade to Quebec, sold his farms to his sons. Alva took this one and lived on it till his death in 1871. Number 48, Nehemiah Herrick Homestead on the Military Turnpike. The original owner was probably Nehemiah Herrick, 1800. The owner when the book was written was Earl Burnell. Herrick moved west in the 1840s, and later owners included Henry Thomas and, that name we've mentioned several times, Dr. L.F. Bidwell.
Are you still living there, Earl?
Yeah, you still there? Okay. Number 49, the Benedict Homestead. That's on Route 3. Thomas Benedict IV built it in 1805. The owner when the book was written by owner was Dr. B. Sheldon Hager, who started Champlain Valley Veterinary Services and retired in recent years. Benedict bought a farm site in 1788. Either he or his son built this house. During the British occupation, it became the headquarters of Major General de Rottenberg, second in command of the British Army. Dr. Spencer got the property in 1927, extensively reconstructed the house. The present owner moved it back from the highway in 1966, and the rest, as they say, is history. The house looks essentially the same from the outside. It's a great homestead, and now the veterinary services. Number 50, the Sachs Gilliland Day home on Route 9 south of Plattsburgh. Original owner J. Sachs, around 1810. Carl Davis owned it when the book was written. Does that look a little bit familiar to you?
I think we've been in there.
I think we've been there. I loved it then. I love it now. Sachs's name can still be seen on the cellar door of the house. He didn't tell us that.
No.
The small stone building nearby was originally a blacksmith shop, and the Salmon River Road once ran between the two structures. Gilliland and Day families later owned the property. 2 silent films were made there. One made the small building into a Scottish cottage. The other was Janice Meredith, made by William Randolph Hearst and Marion Davies in the lead.
And a lot of that movie was shot at the Clinton Community College.
On the bluff.
Yeah, that was a movie that came out in the latter stages of silent movies, and it was kind of a Gone with the Wind type of thing, but it never got the epic reputation that it probably deserved because talkies were just coming out.
You don't have a copy of it, do you?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I should have known.
And they got a
Calvin's got a copy of every movie he likes that he could find. There are a few you couldn't find.
not every movie I like, but every movie that
Historical movies,
yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, and I do have a book in there thing of with some photos that were taken in that movie. But
No kidding.
Yeah.
Still shots.
Yep.
Promotion shot. Oh, that's cool.
and of course Dave Glenn is who.
Oh, David Glenn, of course, our good friend David Glenn, who's into writing for a lot of local publications
Yeah.
now, is a wonderful historian himself, and always fun to talk to because he knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the Gillilands, right?
Yeah.
Okay, number 51, the Mooney Haylett Homestead, Pointer Rush.
We now moved into Beekmantown. We just left Plattsburgh.
Yeah,
now
we're,
in the Beekmantown pages.
boy, we move and groove here. Jeremiah Parsons built it in 1815. Orville Haylett owned it. Of course, we knew the Hayletts so very well. The Parsons family owned the property till mid-century. When Nathan Mooney acquired it, the Hayletts have owned it for 85 years, it says. Number 52, the Moore Homestead, Pointer Rush. Amos Moore built it in 1813. Robert Dooley owned it when this book was written. Boy, isn't that a beautiful stone structure? The Moore family owned this farm for nearly 100 years when Hamilton Gale bought it. Mrs. Gale has life use of the homestead, it says.
Yeah. I assume this is the Bob Dooley who was so involved with all the milk plants in the area.
I'm still working on doing one of those shows, you know. I was talking with Harold Ryan and a few other people. There's still people who were involved in the dairy, in the bottling and dairy industry around here, and we've tried for how many years since we've known each other to get these folks together.
Harold had done some work, and we just never capitalized on it. So we got to get Harold and sit down and do that. But
And
those were the little dairies. But I'm talking with Dooley was the creameries. These were the
Oh, the real creamery, yeah.
These were the big operations that shipped their milk out
Oh, yeah.
on the Rutland and so on.
Okay, number 53, the Stratton Bowles home on Route 9. Henry Stratton built it in 1810. The owner was Edward Monty Jr. when this book was written. Stratton sold his farm in 1819. After several brief ownerships, Pierce Bowles bought the farm in 1844, occupied it for many years. Another one that I love, number 54, Greystone Manor, Route 9. Philip Farnsworth owned it, built it in 1803. Frederick Coots was the owner in 1966. It was apparently a tavern right from the start. At one time, the third floor was used as a school. By tradition, the British were supposed to have fired on it in 1814, mistaking it for a fort. You can understand why.
Them stupid British.
Oh, God.
No wonder they lost.
What did they know, right? Sorry, folks. Farnsworth owned it until 1893, followed by John Conroy. 3-foot wall survived a fire in 1929 that was reconstructed.
Is it still there?
I believe it is.
I'm trying to think if it's still there.
And
It was right in the corner of Spellman Road and Route 9.
and haven't been there in a long time to look at it. Sometimes we just don't pay attention.
Yeah, things are there and then they're gone and you still don't know it.
Yep. Number 55, the Pardee Ryan home on the Moffett Road. Derastus Pardee owned it in 1800. The owner when this book was written was Leo F. Gay. Pardee's heir sold this farm after his death in 1855 to James Ryan. The Ryan family owned it till 1947. 1956, the Culver DeLong home on Route 22. Original owner, Oliver Culver, 1818. Leo Fortin owned it when the book was written. Oliver was the son of the pioneering Culver from whose land Oliver's farm was carved. Oliver held it only until 1822 when he sold it to Jacob DeLong. It was in the DeLong family for several generations. Number 57, the Culver Homestead on Route 22. Original owner Francis Culver, 1814. The present owner at that time was William Crosby, a dear friend. They've rebuilt this home. It was snowing in there when they bought it. There was snow on the ground inside. It's a beautiful homestead inside. And the family settled here before 1800, lived in a dugout in the hillside. How do you like that? The house was built over the original home, which then became a basement. Although unfinished in 1814, the British wounded from the skirmish at Culver Hill nearby were brought here. That makes it very significant. Webbs and Fishers were later owners, the present owner restoring the home structure as his home. He and his wife, wonderful people. He's involved at the college, and she's done so many great things in the area. I wrote a story about her for Strictly Business. Number 58 is the Allen Beckwith home in East Beekmantown. The original owners, Ebenezer and Abel Allen. Builder, Ozias Safford. There he is again. 1804. The owner was Leo Corrin Sr. when the book was written. In 1804, Jonas Allen, who originally lived on Tom Miller Road, it says see picture 33, deeded part of his Beekmantown farm to his two sons. Abel seems to have become the sole owner. House was built by Safford of Keysville. Dr. Baruch Beckwith owned it for a time after 1836, then Dr. Franklin Weaver in 1849.
Now, he had one son named Abel. I hope he didn't name the other one Cain.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Aha. Number 59, the Douglas Farm. That's with two S's. Douglas Farm in East Beekmantown. Thomas Douglas built it in 1805. Garnett Pratt owned it when this book was written. Note the TV antenna on the roof. Those are kind of rare. Two generations of Douglases, Samuel Howes and George Rhea, have owned this property, it says.
I'm going to have to correct you again. That George Rhea, R-E-A, is actually Ray.
Is it spelled Ray? Ray Brook.
Right. That's
right, not far from here.
Yeah, the Ray Brook that goes through Beekmantown there. Addie Shields was very instrumental in getting that changed several years ago because the little sign on Route 22, it always said R-A-Y Brook.
Oh, no, I did not know
and
that.
She got it changed to R-E-A, so you go through there now and it says R-E-A, Ray Brook. So George
Okay,
Ray.
I'm so glad you corrected me on that. Okay, Ray Brook, George Ray. And number 60, the John Howe Farm, John Howe Jr. Farm in East Beekman Town. John Howe Jr., 1805. Dr. Lynn Palmer,
Another doctor.
another wonderful veterinarian in the area, the Palmer family, and they still have a veterinary service up there on Route 22. John Jr. obtained his farm from his father, who resided in the vicinity. That's number 27. The stone part served as a temporary British hospital after skirmishes in the neighborhood. The front is a later addition. Howe's held the farm till 1854. Now, number 61, the Dominy homestead, Route 22, north of the Corners. Henry Dominy owned it, Henry Dominy Jr. in 1810. Present owner, it says, was Lawrence Gagnon. Dominy came to Beekman Town as a boy in 1796, sold the property in 1818. Ichabod Dawson bought it in 1841. It's still referred to as the Dawson Farm. A lot of great stone buildings. Number 62, the Beckwith home at Beekman Town Corners. Dr. Baruch Beckwith owned it 1815. Mrs. Beulah Twining owned it when the book was written. Beckwith was the town's first physician in 1810. The original house, probably the wing on the right, behind the modern porch. When he moved to East Beekman Town in 1836, he deeded this house to his son George, who probably added the main section of the house. It was later the home of Dr. Romeo Hyde. Number 63, the Barber homestead on the Barber Road. Benjamin Barber owned it when it was built in 1805, and Herbert Stone owned it in 1966 when this book was written. The house is built in sections. The part across the front apparently is the oldest. From Benjamin descended the Barbers who engaged in retail business in Plattsburgh. Number 64, the Parrott Meter homestead on the Military Turnpike. Adoniram, there's a name for you, Adoniram Parrott, 1805. Roma Castine Jr. owned it when the book was written. Parrott was a Revolutionary War soldier, veteran, who migrated to Clinton County with the Broadwells in 1804, sold his farm to his nephew David Broadwell in 1824, who in turn sold it to James Meter in 1838. I'm very familiar with this next house, and I believe some of my wife's relatives lived in this home for some time. Look at this, just looks like an old house. Yeah. Number 65, the Rand homestead on Rand Hill. Israel Rand owned it in 1810. Lauren Giles owned it when the book was written. The man for whom Rand Hill is named built the left part of the building. Rands owned it till 1861 when Garrett Thu bought it and extended the building to the right. 3 generations of Thus owned it till 1965. Number 66, boy, this deserved a whole page.
Yeah.
The Alexander Scott home in Chazy Village. Alexander Scott in 1810. Robert Neverett owned it when the book was written. One of the most handsome structures in the county. The home had a basement kitchen, silver doorknobs. On one of the fireplaces in bas relief may be seen the profiles of Shakespeare and Franklin. Its owner, Mr. Scott, ran a store in town. 1814, Governor General Sir George Prevost, of Canada, stayed here on his way to attack Plattsburgh. That doesn't choke you up, nothing will.
I believe the Neveretts still own it, although Bob Neverett recently passed away within the last year.
Yeah. Okay, number 67, the Douglas Mill House, Chazy Village. Original owner David Douglas in 1804. Oliver Levine owned it when the book was written. Jonathan Douglas built a grist mill on the river and this home for his brother David, who was the mill's first operator. Number 66, the Douglas Mansion in Chazy Village. Was a Chazy Hotel when this book was written. Look at it.
Yeah.
Original owner Jonathan Douglas, 1805. The owner when the book was written, Mrs. Denise Lazzie, as the Chazy Hotel. Jonathan, owner of the grist mill, built the brick part of the structure, which was known as the Douglas Mansion. Originally built with a hipped roof, Lemuel North and his son Alexander owned it for years. In recent times, a front section has been added. Number 69, the Merritt home in Chazy Village. Original owner Nehemiah Merritt, 1811. The owner in 1966 was Harry Barber. Merritt had a cloth dressing business on the river near his home by 1807. Merritt's owned the property till 1883, then Wheeler's till 1937 when Mr. Barber acquired it. This is, okay, we got a picture and an inset here. Number 70 and 70A. The Hubble Home in Chazy Village, another one we've talked about so many times on Hometown Cable. The original owner was Julius Hubble, 1787 to 1880. It was built 1816, 1817. The owner, when the book was written, was Joseph West. So Hubble arrived in town in 1808, became its first lawyer. Complete record exists of the source of the materials that went into the house. Isn't that great? Lived there till he died at the age of 93. He built his office in 1811, 1812. Used it for nearly 70 years. During the War of 1812, Generals Dearborn, Izard, Hampton, and Pike occupied it, as well as the British in 1814. It's now the public library, donated by the family when the book was written.
The little building is, yeah.
The little building.
Yeah, the big building. I shot a lot of the programs I did with Dr. Middleton. Dr. Middleton lived in that home for many years.
For a long time, yes.
And now the Misiaks are the owners, Alex and Linda Misiak.
All right. Number 71, the Ebenezer Scott Home in Chazy Village, originally owned by Ebenezer Asher Scott, 1810 and 11. The Minor Foundation, as the Alice Minor Colonial Home, owned it when this book was written. It's still the home of the famous Alice T. Minor Museum.
Yep.
That's a wonderful place. Scott, a merchant and brother of Alexander, built first a one-story store and home, inserted a device in the east wall for destroying it if the war brought the British. I never knew that. He added two other floors in 1824, the third floor being used by the Harmony Lodge of Champlain for years. William H. Minor acquired the property in 1914. Between 1919 and 1924, he completely but exactly rebuilt it, also adding on to the rear. It was opened as a museum in 1924. Great place. Yeah. Okay, number 72, the Graves Home in Chazy Village, owned by Chandler Graves when it was built in 1801. Miller W. Mayo owned it when the book was written. Mr. Graves operated a mill on the river near his house. The Graves family occupied the house for much of the century. Number 73, the Carver Homestead, Chazy Village, original owner Dr. Nathan Carver, 1810 and 11. Pearlie Dupree owned it when the book was written. Dr. Carver first came to town in 1806, built a log house south of the site to which he brought his bride. He was the town's first doctor, opened a school in the house. Carver was a descendant of the Pilgrim family of the same name. Number 74, the Fisk Home in Chazy Village. Original owner Solomon Fisk in 1813. Was owned by Dr. George Clark when the book was written. Fisk came to Chazy a poor man in 1807, prospered with his tannery and shoemaking business. His stone office still stands near the house, but his office tannery on the river is gone. One of Fisk's sons was the inventor of metallic coffins. I don't know if I'd want to be known for that. Well, everybody's got to make a mark.
Dr. Clark is still there, as far as I know.
Number 75, the Israel Tracy Home on Route 348. Israel Tracy built it in 1807. William Dupree owned it in 1966. Tracy settled here before 1805, but sold his farm in 1810. Nearby Tracy Brook is named for this early settler. Number 76, the Daniel Tracy Home on Route 348. Daniel Tracy built it in 1815. Alphonse Gagnon owned it when the book was written. I think that house is still there. Daniel settled here about 1813, built this house adjoining his brother's former home. He died in 1825, left his wife and 6 children who occupied the property for many years.
I'm going to guess, although I didn't know him, that Alphonse probably pronounced his last name Gagnon.
In those days, I'm sure. Now it would be Gagnon around here, right?
Yep.
You're probably right. Number 77, the Slauson Homestead on the Rata Road. William Slauson, 1816. Clarence Trombley owned it when the book was written. 1816, William Slauson bought a large farm and probably shortly built his house. Over a period of time, he added to it. Many years later, the house was divided and a part moved nearby to make another house. The property remained in the family through several generations till 1931.
And I spent a lot of hours in that home. Clarence Trombley was my uncle, and you got to meet my Aunt Anna before she passed away.
Right.
That's on the Rada Road, and Clarence had a Shell oil business for many years.
Sure.
And he's the brother of Richard Russell and Arnold and all those other Trombleys from Jay-Z.
Oh, great little family history. You don't mind if we interject here, folks. We may never get through all the pictures, but
We're going to run short here.
yeah, we're rolling. Number 78, the Brick Tavern, Ingraham. Original owner Lester Sampson, builder Ozias Safford. There he is again, around 1801. The owner, when the book was written, was Mrs. Herman Blair. The settlement nearby was known as Sampson's till 1854, when the post office was designated by its present name. Sampson operated one of the famous hostelries of the county until his death in 1828. Later in the century, the building was known universally as the Brick Tavern.
Still to this day.
To this day. Number 79, the Valentine Homestead on Route 9.
Valentine.
Oh, Valentine, I'm so sorry. That's even better.
Yeah.
No Valens in there just because it's Valentine's Day, right?
You're thinking Valentine.
Yeah, Valentine Homestead, Route 9, original owner Abraham Valentine in 1810. Lyles Trombley, is that another one of the family members? Owned it in 66?
Well, Lyles is still there. Of course, his son Tony and daughter-in-law Marcia are famous for their John Deere tractors. So
yes, of course.
That's the area where we're talking right
Okay.
there. At Ingraham.
Yep. Abraham bought a large farm in 1806, probably built a frame house. It appears to have been bricked over in mid-century, giving it its present Victorian appearance. Remained in the family for most of the century.
At this point, we should have already seen this. This is just the map of the houses that, and these books are available to look at the Clinton County Historical Association. So anybody wants to go in there, and I'm sure for $1 or $2, they'd if you got particular involvement with one of these homes, I'm sure they'd let you make a copy of it there and charge $1 or $2 or whatever.
Of the photograph.
Of the photograph, sure.
Now, you don't think this has been reprinted since the last time?
Not since '71. Nope.
So there aren't many
Nope.
or any copies available.
Nope.
Did you get yours on the internet?
I don't know if I bought this from Nancy Donahoe. I think I had it longer before I got involved with the internet. So I would guess I bought this at the Cornerstone bookstore.
I still have no idea how this book came into my possession.
How you got yours?
The dog that did his duty on it has been dead for 20 years, so who knows? All right, number 80, the Fisk Homestead on Route 9, original owner Ira Fisk. Dates to 1815, the present owner Byron
Papa George.
Papa George. There you go. Ira, brother of Solomon, settled there in 1813. His son went into the ministry and started a Wesleyan church in West Jay-Z. Wow. Okay, 81. This is one of the most beautiful homes.
Yep.
And it's been featured in many national and international magazines through the years. And yes, it's haunted. It's really, really haunted. The Trombley log home of Trombley Bay. Original owner John B. Trombley, 1805. The owner when this was built was John Coolidge and Nina, who's been involved in so much in the North Country, including Clinton Community College and other foundations and boards.
As far as you know, Nina's still there.
Nina is still there, and she's just a dear lady. John came to this area 1786 as a boy. His father's cabin had but one room.
That's John Trombley, not John Coolidge.
That's right. A long time ago, 1786. His father's cabin had only one room. John built one of two rooms there, and there raised a family of 11 children. His cabin is the central part of the structure. It was moved to its present site in another log building joined to it on the right. A stone wing has been added to the left to make this attractive dwelling. Oh, that whole area is haunted so beautifully. I love it. Okay, now we're getting into familiar territory again. Number 82, Sachs's Stone Store, Shazy Landing. The original owner, Matthew Sachs, 1815. Present owner, it said, was William Holt Sachs. And this is the focus of a show we did with Helen Sachs Booth.
Yep.
And a lady I met just a few days ago when I was being tested for something in a a local doctor's office just bought the other stone store. I think it's right across the road, and they've spent months and months rehabbing it. Her name is Sweet. And so maybe we'll take a picture of that someday. Who knows? Mr. Sachs settled at the Landing in 1808. At Sachs's Landing, this was a busy commercial center until the coming of the railroads. Sachs lost much of his property in Murray's Raid, 1813. After the war, he built this stone store with its Dutch gables. It bears the date 1822, but was used for some time before it was considered complete. It was used as a store till 1904. Impeccable records, huh? Some of them lost in the fire, but some of them survived. The present Mr. Sachs belongs, it says, to the 5th generation has remodeled the building for his home. We'll have to do a little tour up there sometime. Wouldn't you love it?
Yeah, when he's out of town, we'll go through.
And Skip is out of town. We tried to get him. That's his name, Skip, I think, Helen's brother. Tried to get him to come down, but he couldn't make it that day. Number 83, Ransom's Tavern, Chazy Landing. Jabez Ransom owned it about 1805. Alice Sweet Estate was connected with it in 1966. The tavern had a large dance floor. For years was the social center of the settlement. Doors of the room still have their original numbers. After Ransom's, it was known as the Hill House. So we're up to number 84, the Sullivan Home, Chazy Landing. Original owner Timothy Sullivan, 1803. Robert Fulton, another Robert Fulton, owned it when the book was written. This was a combined house and store, the first store in town. Sullivan sold it to Matthew Sachs in 1809, who also used it for a store until he built his own building. I wonder if that's the one that this young woman told me she bought. Huh, we'll have to find out.
Could be.
Could be. It was empty for many years, and she said they've just spent a long time remodeling it and haven't moved in yet. We'll find out. Number 85, the Lawrence Home, Chazy Landing. Original owner William Lawrence, date 1807. The owner when the book was written was Gerald Sweet. William was a settler by 1800, built a wharf, a tannery, and this house. The first two-story dwelling in Chazy. Mr. Lawrence moved to Chazy Village in 1816, to West Chazy in 1818, and that's number 86, the one we're coming up with. The Lawrence Home. Original owner William Lawrence, 1819. The owner was Irving Lapierre, Mrs. Irving Lapierre, when this book was written. After living previously at Chazy Landing and Chazy Village, Mr. Lawrence moved to West Chazy, known until 1833 as Lawrence's Mills, after this early settler. His home served as a town hall as well as church for years. He planned the building for this purpose on the condition that 1/3 of the town meetings be held in West Chazy.
And I'm trying to think if Patty Shields' maiden name was Lawrence. It just sounds so familiar, but I don't want to put that out there as a public record. But I almost think so, but I don't. I'm not positive of that.
I should know that too.
I know one who would know, Addie.
She's a dear lady, and when she sees this, you will get a telephone call, and you will be on the phone with her for an hour and 35 minutes. She's such a wonderful person, such a dear lady. Now we're at 87, the Heading Home in West Chazy, built by William Heading in 1817, and owned by Eugene Gadway when the book was written. Heading was a merchant in town. His daughter sold the house in 1868 to Minor Chamberlain, also a merchant. In 88, oh, look at that nice Buick in front of the house. 1988, the Harris Tavern in West Chazy. Original owner Joseph Harris, 1810. Present owner, it says, the Walter Gagno for a restaurant. Original tavern, one story of the left wing. The Harrises operated it till 1844. Hiram Witherell owned it between 1849 and 1855. Then he went into the hotel business in Plattsburgh, as we well know, from the famous
famous Hiram Hotel. Yeah,
yeah, the Hiram. Yeah.
Or you're thinking of the Witherell, huh?
Contrary to popular belief, the Lincoln Tunnel was not built by Abraham Tunnel. You made me think of that old joke. Okay, anyway, he raised the structure to its present 1.5 stories. Warren McFadden operated the McFadden house here and added the large section to the right.
You know what, Gordy? We are about halfway through this book. We've been going for almost an hour and 20 minutes, and if we continue here, we're going to run out of tape. So I think going halfway through it will be a good time to pause. And I'm going to pause that camera, and we're going to be right back. Okay, Gordy, I veered away, and
I noticed that.
what people are looking at on the screen right now is one of the books that I found on eBay recently, and it has nothing to do with what we've been talking about, but just before we wrap up,
We are talking about history, so it is
Yeah.
still important.
but here's I've searched and searched because, as you know, there's been a lot of different theories on where Pike's Cantonment was. This is a booklet that was put out in 1914,
Part of the centennial for the Battle of Plattsburgh.
and in there is a map that shows Pike's Cantonment. And you would think that in 1914 they would know exactly where it was. So
It shows Friedenberg Falls, and it shows right under that in very tiny print. I don't know
Very
how
small.
you saw that. It says Pike's Cantonment.
and it shows it to be on the north side of the river, and the northwest side of the river. So
We'll talk with Keith about that.
yeah,
He's probably seen this picture,
I would think so.
and I'm not sure because it's. I'm not sure who drew this map, and I find it interesting that this book strayed from this area to Western Michigan Genealogical Society because it has a.
Well, this
it has
was
on the.
this was in the Grand Rapids.
No kidding.
Library. Yep.
Isn't that interesting?
It's stapled Grand Rapids Public Library, and its title is "What the Battle of Plattsburgh: What Historians Say About It." And the Centennial Committee is the one that put this together.
New York State Centennial Committee.
Yep. And once again, we see that that fellow named Roosevelt there, Franklin Roosevelt, was part of that committee, and names like Wadhams and a whole lot of others, Stetson, and names that are familiar to us in this area are also on that committee, but they're Fairbank from Shazy.
That was a real find. I'm not sure that the association has a copy of it. I've seen a copy of the book somewhere over the years, but it's so long ago that I didn't remember seeing that map, and I'm not sure that my eyes were ever good enough to readily pick out Pike's Cantonment. That's so tiny.
Well, whenever I see an old map includes Plattsburgh,
You look.
I always search for Pike's Cantonment. And you figure in 1914 they knew exactly where it was.
Well, toward the end of the 19th century, Dr. Kellogg described the scene as he looked over
Right.
the
Coming down
original
on the train and
property
so on,
coming
yeah.
down on the train, the Pike's Cantonment. We've heard a lot about that.
Yeah.
We've really had a good time
Yeah.
in what's going to turn out to be Chapter 1 in a two-part series.
Coming next time in Chapter 2, Gordy and Calvin will go to Rouse's Point, Champlain, spent a lot of time in Champlain, then Moores, Schuyler Falls, Peru, and I think the next one is we're going to end in Ausable.
Oh, Sable, that's great.
So we'll be.
You think we'll get to Graves Mansion? I can't remember. I had this book long before I knew about Graves Mansion, and you did this with Bob, a program
Yeah.
with Graves Mansion, one of the great homes there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if,
Anyway,
which county Graves Mansion is in.
this book was put together painstakingly by the late Dr. Alan Everest, who was an educator and tremendous North Country historian. Who, boy, talk about leaving a legacy. We all dream of doing that, and he certainly did, having written a number of books, including The Pioneer Homes of Clinton County, 1790 to 1820, Alan S. Everest. Thanks to him way back when for putting these books together, Calvin's copy and my hard copy. We had fun covering about half the homes, talking about them, and we'll invite your comments if you hear this program and know a little bit about what might be going on presently with one of these buildings, where it went to and when it was destroyed. If it was, please let us know. We're always looking for new ideas. We thank you always for your comments, and your suggestions. And even more than that, we thank you for your personal and other business contributions. Published by the Clinton County Historical Association, our dear friends, and reprinted, republished on Hometown Cable with their full permission, our dear friends.
And if you want to see a copy for yourself, don't go to Gordy's house. Don't come to my house. Go to the county museum.
And they'll show you one that's not upside down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know where we're going to be next time for our little corner.